Coming down in 3, 2, 1. Well, good morning, everyone. If you are with us live on our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast, I am Hub Arkush, along with my co-hosts each week. Our Chicago Bears beat reporter at ShawLocal.com is Sean Hammond, and of course, our group sports editor for all of Shaw Media, Kyle Nabors, is here as he is each week as well. We appreciate all of you being with us. I say, if you are with us live, if you're listening to this as a podcast and you're joining us for the first time, we actually broadcast this on StreamYard. You can get there and join us during the broadcast and participate. Easiest way is to go to one of our Twitter handles at Sean_Hammond, at Kyle Nabors, or at Hub_Arkush. Any of those 3 Twitter accounts will show you easily how to get into the broadcasting of this podcast. Or you can go to YouTube, and there are different ways to get in. If you prefer just to have it as a podcast, that's great. We do recommend that you go to the App Store on your phone or iTunes or ShawLocal.com and download a subscription to the podcast so it comes to you each week without you having to worry about it. You can listen at your leisure. But we love having you guys with us because in the comments section, you can post your questions, your thoughts. And let's be honest, we're at a time of the season where there's not a lot of breaking news. And so we're not sure what's most on your minds. It helps a lot when you guys participate. Plus, we've reached the point now, we've been doing this for about 5-6 months. We know who our regulars are. We feel like we're getting to be friends. And we love to see you guys in there every week, Gary and Quessy and everybody who shows up on a regular basis. And we will get to your comments in just a moment. But this week, Sean and I, of course, out at Hallis Hall each week for the OTAs. And we visited with Teven Jenkins for the first time, it seems like since, not even at the end of the season. I forget the last time we got to talk to him. And one of the things that we've noticed, I know, Sean, you have a good story on it at ShawLocal.com right now for anybody who likes to read our stuff in addition to talking with us and hearing us talk to you, about the fact that he is at right tackle. I think it's funny to me, Sean, a lot of people are making a lot of it. I think it's simply because that's his natural position. And I know I was surprised from the beginning when Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy tried to sell him as a left tackle, never understood it. Don't see much that tells me he can be a great left tackle. Do see some traits that can make him a great right tackle. If, in fact, he's that kind of player. Right now, he's still an untested second-round draft choice who missed most of his rookie season. But it was interesting visiting with Teven and getting his thoughts on it. And the fact that he's actually gone through some training and body type changes to try and make things go better on the right side now that, at least for now, that appears to be his home.
Yeah, we're starting to see Ryan Poles' goals for this offensive line in action as far as getting lighter, getting quicker. Teven said he's lost about 20 pounds. He's down about 10% body fat. So, and that's just in, what has it been, 4-5 months since Ryan Poles came aboard. We can see that in action. I mean, we can see where this is going. It's not super surprising that Teven is playing on the right side. Like you said, Hub, he did that. That was mostly where he played in college. I remember I talked to his O-line coach at Oklahoma State last year when he was coming out right after he got drafted. And the goal had been for him to play left tackle his last year there. And he did start that season opener at left tackle, but there was an injury on the line, and just with the personnel, it just made the most sense to put him back on the right side. And so he played the right side the rest of his last year in college. And I mean, he's looked really good on that right side, and he did in college. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see him a ton last season. So hopefully he can stay healthy through the off season and we get a better look at what he's looking like as a player.
Kyle, it's an interesting argument with Jenkins about what happened at college. First of all, you got to deal with Mike Gundy, which you always get a little hyperbole when you're talking about anything. But we've heard that explanation, and I'm sure it's true for the most part. He was starting at left. The starting right tackle went down. They said the number 3 tackle was much better at left tackle than he was at right tackle, so they moved Jenkins back to right tackle. That doesn't make sense to me. If Teven Jenkins was your best left tackle, you don't weaken yourself at 2 positions just because you have an injury on the right side. So that's what we've heard. Sean is absolutely correct. That the Oklahoma State folks did feel that he could play it. I know that there was some conversation about whether he didn't have an agent at the time, but since has an agent, may have pushed for it because everybody knows left tackles make a little more money than right tackles, and they were preparing for an NFL career. But at the end of the day, 17 starts starts at right tackle at Oklahoma State, 7 at left tackle. And more than that, when you watch him and you see the kind of athlete he is and the way he plays the game, he just appears to have better right tackle skills. He's never demonstrated the dancer's feet that you look for in a left tackle. He does have the wingspan and the great size and leverage. But I just think that if he's going to be, more than just another guy in the NFL, it's more likely to happen at right tackle. And I think part of the frustration everybody has with the Bears offensive line right now is it's almost as if there's an assumption that, he and Larry Borom are your tackles, and yet we don't know enough about either one of them to know if either one of them can play it in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly not set in stone whether those two guys are going to be your starters at tackles. Right now, with the way the roster is constructed, I think that's probably the most likely scenario come week 1. But I have no idea how these guys are going to perform over the course of a 17 game schedule. Overall, when it comes to the Teven Jenkins move to right tackle, I don't know about you guys, but to me, it just kind of felt right in the gut. When I read that, I was like, that seems like the right decision. Considering where Teven Jenkins played and had his most success in college. And then I realized it was a small sample size with him at left tackle last season, and he was coming back from a back injury. But when you combined the fact that he did struggle a little bit to get his feet under him at left tackle, and Larry Borom, I think he performed better at left tackle than any of us really expected. When you put all that together, I just saw that when that news come across, and I went, that makes sense. That seems like the best fit and the best chance for both of those guys to succeed.
I think at the end of the day, if they do not succeed at either tackle spot here in Chicago or in the NFL, they're going to be tried at guard. And as a matter of fact, Borom coming out of school was projected much higher as a guard than a tackle. But he must have been prescient or something, guys. He knew Ryan Poles was coming, because here's a guy that changed his body type last year when he was drafted. The last time we saw him on tape at Missouri, he was this big, brawling, mauling, sloppy right tackle, and he showed up to his rookie mini camp last year under Matt Nagy 30 pounds lighter. He did it right off the bat, turned out to be a much better athlete than anybody realized, and did show better feet. Sean, I think we can say that, from watching whatever we've seen in practice and a little bit of game action after 1 year. Borom does appear to have better feet than Teven Jenkins, and that's why it just is so logical that at least for now he's on the left side and Jenkins is on the right. Borom, however, also appears to have a higher ceiling at guard. So I think I would argue at this point, with what we know about them, I'm not projecting their futures or predicting anything, but right now I think Borom is probably at least the more flexible and more complete O-line prospect for him than Jenkins is.
Yeah, and just the fact that he saw the field a lot more, and that's not Tevin's fault with the injury, but that's just the reality of it. He was on the field a lot, Larry Borom was, and that's an interesting point about the weight loss thing, Hub. We haven't gotten to talk to Larry yet this spring. I hope we do sometime in the next couple of weeks here, because I'd be really curious to get his perspective on that, having, like you said, basically done it a year ahead of time.
You look at it too. There was a lot of angst over the last few years about the previous Bears regime kind of moving guys around on the offensive line and not using them in their natural position or their best possible positions. And I think right away you should feel a little bit more comfortable, at least when looking at this offensive line and the way this regime is going to approach it. When, like I said, you get the feeling that they're putting those guys in the best position to succeed. Which was really, like I said, a complaint about the, Ryan Pace and the coaching staff, previously.
I just got distracted for a second there, guys. I got a hi from Frank in Oak Park, who I think is mad at me for only mentioning Quessy and Robert and some of the other guys. Rick is here and Mr. Shorty and everybody. Thank you guys all for being with us. We're going to get to your questions in just a minute. Guys, I think the other thing that's intriguing here, there's so many bodies now, it's ridiculous. I mean, I've never seen a team in any kind of OTA or mini camp where more than half the players on the field are offensive linemen and defensive backs. I mean, the numbers at those two positions are just kind of, mind-boggling right now. And one of the things that Poles has done very quietly, remember about 6-7 years ago, just in the third wave of free agency, the Bears brought in Cornelius Lucas, and everybody said, okay. And they had some injuries, and he ended up starting games both at right and left tackle. It may have even been 2018. I'd have to go back and look. But he turned out to be their best tackle, and yet they let him go after 1 year. Well, 3 or 4 years later, he is still one of the more valuable sixth offensive linemen in football. And it's the quiet moves that they've made, is you're signing veterans late, like Julian Davenport and Sean Coleman. These are Cornelius Lucas type guys who, even though they're here battling for and auditioning for that swing tackle spot, if one or both of them had to start games for you, it's something that they've done with a number of teams in the NFL. So they've brought their insurance packages in behind these kids. And to me, the biggest question right now is right guard, Sean, because, we've seen the OTAs are 3 days a week. The media is only allowed 1 day a week. So week one, we saw Sam Mustafer taking all the first team snaps at right guard. This week, we saw he and Dakota Dozier switching every group of reps, so to speak. They go through 1s, 2s, and 3s. And Sam would be with the 1s, and then Dozier would be with the 2s, and then the next time they'd flip it around. I don't think they're sold on either of them. Dakota Dozier is a guy who 7 years in the league has been a starter once. That was 2 years ago in Minnesota, and that went so poorly. He was only active for 6 games last year. Sam is a average to better than average center who, for whatever his reasons are, Ryan Poles decided he had to have Lucas Patrick, who is no more than an average to a better than average center, and gave him the position. And I assumed it just meant that they didn't like Mustafer, but they also did re-sign him. He was a restricted free agent, and he has been taking, number 1 reps at guard. And what's weird about it, Sean and I keep talking about this out of practice, the roster, they list him at 332 pounds. They list Sam Mustafer as the heaviest offensive lineman in camp. Well, one of the things on him coming out of Notre Dame was he wasn't even touching 300, and he's been working out, I think, since he got here. But I know one of his personal trainers and coaches is Olin Kreutz, and I know they added about 5-10 pounds of muscle in the weight room. Now I look at him; he still doesn't look 332 to me. I still think it's a typo on the roster, but he would have had to have gotten bigger to play guard. And yet I've never really seen him projected as a guard in the NFL. I've always seen his position pretty much locked in at center, Sean. So it's really curious what's happening there. But where I'm going with this is I think the best right guard on the team right now is Larry Borum. But the problem is maybe you're starting left tackle too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, I remembering back to last year, I feel like we talked to Sam about putting on some weight last summer, and I wonder if that is now the reverse. Now that they're getting lighter and quicker, do they have him doing, ping pong in both ways over the course of a year here? I would. It's hard to say because we only get to see practice, once a week, and really, we can't really get a good feel for things until we're in training camp and the pads are on. But I would feel like Dakota Dozier might be the favorite for that spot, at least as it is right now, only because he's started at guard for a whole season in the NFL. And like you said, Hub, we don't know. We've never seen Sam Mustafer play guard at this level. So, and in college, he was mostly a center and maybe 100% a center. I'd have to go back and check his college starts and all that. But it'd be a little surprising to see him take that spot.
I think the difference, Kyle, is that when you look at Dakota Dozier, you look at the kid they drafted not from California. Where did Zach Thomas go to school?
San Diego State.
San Diego State.
Yeah.
And then you look at Larry Borum. They're 6'5", 6'6". They have these frames on which 305, 310 looks almost svelte or slim. You look at Sam on that 6'2" body, and even if it's just the same thing, 305, 310, it's going to look a lot puffier. But if it is 332, he definitely looks heavier to me than he's ever been. And you know what? Whatever it takes to play the position. I don't think Ryan Poles has said he'll eliminate anybody because of their size. He just has talked about a style of athlete that he wants. But as uncertain as we are about these two kids at tackle, Jenkins and Borum, I still think the most unsettled position on that line is right guard, and it's also where there's the most competition.
Yeah, I mean, you feel better about the upside at the tackle position with Borum and Jenkins at least. You look at what they've done at guard. You mentioned, and we were talking about Sam Mustafer having an opportunity at guard. You look back, and we know that the Bears at least targeted Ryan Bates. We don't know who else they looked at guard. But it makes you wonder with what they've been doing with Mustafer and Dozier and the other guys at guard if I think clearly they don't know what they want to do at that spot. Maybe, like I said, they missed out on a few guys that they were really hoping could solidify that spot. So now they're in a position where they have to try out a bunch of guys. And Gary Ross earlier here in the questions had said, why is Thomas not getting repped with the ones at right guard? Hub, Sean, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, I can say quickly, number one, that he was primarily a tackle at San Diego State, even though he did play some guard as well. But beyond that, I think it's probably as simple because he's a fifth or sixth round draft choice who's in his first couple practices in the NFL and just isn't ready. And what they're trying to do. The interesting thing about this, Sean, is that offensive line, I'm told by almost everybody I've ever covered, work in the game in all these years, is the unit on the field that requires the most teamwork, the best timing, the best chemistry with the guys around you. And right now, to take the rookie Thomas and throw him out there with these guys, not only could it delay his and the offense's development a little bit, but it could slow down some of the other line. That's why they're rotating these veterans in and out, trying to find out about them. Let's not forget Braxton Jones is there. Kramer, all the kids they brought in. Ford, Jatari Carter, I don't think I've really noticed out there either. These kids, this time of the year, I think, Sean, for them is more about the individual drills and getting coached up and technique. And I think once we get to training camp, there's a better chance. The one youngster that we have seen running with the ones and twos is that kid I keep talking about, the undrafted rookie free agent, Chase Allen at tight end. But other than that, you're not going to see a lot of these kids unless they're first or second round picks running with the ones or twos.
Yeah, they're mostly just getting acclimated and getting to know the system and getting comfortable. And yeah, I wouldn't, just because Zach Thomas isn't necessarily, running with the ones doesn't mean he couldn't be, come the end of August, but I certainly wouldn't predict that either. He's a late round pick. He's a guy who might need a little bit of time and, played a lot of different spots in college and he just needs to get comfortable in that right guard spot.
And there's always a lot of change along offensive lines when we actually get into the preseason too. It's one of those position groups where I actually feel like the preseason does matter quite a bit for them. Those guys, OTAs and these mini camps and stuff, when you see depth charts and where guys are lined up, particularly when it comes to the rookies, take it with a grain of salt. Things will start to change rapidly once we get into training camp, where they start to. It's still training camp has changed a lot over the last 15 years. It's not nearly as physical as it was, but the offensive line is still my most entertaining portion to watch during training camp. And then during the preseason, that's where those guys, those rookies, the Zach Thomas, the Braxton Jones, that's where those guys are going to have a chance to play themselves into a starting role.
The one nugget, I'm not a big nugget guy, but the one nugget I did drop on Twitter the other day after practice was seeing Chase, I believe it's number 47, Chase Allen, undrafted rookie tight end out of Iowa State, running with the ones. And what's intriguing about that, first of all, they were all out there. Cole Kmet was there. Shaughnessy was there. Griffin. Sean, I keep getting confused if his name is Rice and John or John Rice. And I think it's Rice and John.
Yeah, it's Rice and John.
Yeah. They were all out there. And yet here's Allen running with the ones. And there's no contact and no pads even. And what's significant about that is that most people I know are shocked that Allen wasn't drafted. And a lot of people even had him possibly sneaking into the end of the third round, but certainly looking like a 4 to 6 round prospect. And yet there he is. We also know, or at least it's been reported, that the Bears gave him a much bigger signing bonus than they usually do to UDRFAs. This happens. That's what makes them priority undrafted rookie free agents. And yet even with, and the reason is that he was rated by a number of scouts I talked to as the best inline blocking tight end coming out this year. And so he is a perfect fit for a 2 tight end scheme like the Bears are going to want to run a lot with a focus on that running game. And yet they can't practice any of that yet. There's no contact, there's no pads. And the fact that they still had him out there running with the ones for whatever reason, it at least tells me that they're as interested in him as I am. And so that's a kid you want to keep an eye on as we go forward. So, I know we've got a lot of questions, guys. Obviously, the whole story is not the offensive line. I do want to remind you again, your participation as we broadcast is helpful because, there's not going to be a lot of news at this time of the year. The next big thing, I always laugh. We go out there every week and we see a lot of our fellow, media guys taking attendance. Everybody wants to know who's here and who's not, and then wants to, discuss any veteran who's not there. It's voluntary, and I have never, in the years I've been doing this, seen as many veterans skipping voluntary workouts around the NFL as we're seeing this year, last year, a couple of years. Some of this is just revolt against things they don't like in the CBA. Some of it is contract maneuvering, a lot of different things. We don't know what to make. Let's just touch on this before we get to the questions. The fact that Robert Quinn hasn't been there yet doesn't bother me at all. We finally got to know Robert a little bit last year, and he's an interesting guy, and I don't think he's missing or needs anything. But immediately people are suggesting that he wants out, that he's asked for a trade, that they're trying to deal him. There are no reports I'm aware of any of that other than the fact that he hasn't chosen to be at these voluntary workouts. And I do believe, Sean, that they've said he has been around Hallis Hall. It's not like nobody has seen him. But he's not participating. We've gotten that with some of the other veterans too. So you just can't make too much of that right now because it is a growing trend around the league that a lot of these veterans are just saying, no, I want more of my summer off.
Yeah, and the Bears had a handful of veterans sit out last year too, and I'm trying to remember if Robert was one of them. Do you remember, Hub?
He was on and off. He was not completely absent, but he was on and off. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't read into it. Look, Robert Quinn's been around the block a few times. He knows what he needs to do to be ready to play. And yeah, we saw him a few weeks ago when he was getting the Piccolo Award. That was it, right? Yeah. He was in the building. We talked to him that day. Everything seemed normal, at least then.
I mean,
go ahead, Kyle. I'm sorry.
No, I was just
gonna say not only everything seemed normal, he seemed upbeat. I mean, I can go back and check some of the quotes while we're talking. There was no indication that he wanted out. That's all I wanted to add, Kyle. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right. There's been no indication from Robert Quinn. There's been just chatter from talking heads because we're at that time of the year. I saw another Chicago-based publication at a story about should the Bears trade Robert Quinn, and my thought was just no, unless someone does something stupid and gives you a first or second round pick. But the reason the Bears haven't traded, I'm sure the Bears would be open to trading Robert Quinn if someone was willing to overpay for him. But as we've seen across the league this offseason, teams aren't really willing to part with draft choices for someone in Robert Quinn's mold. You look at the age, and yeah, he had a great season last year, but the season before that, I mean, you're not getting anything probably at tops of 3. You're probably getting a 4th or 5th round pick. And doing that significantly weakens your defense this year. And while, yeah, they're in the rebuild, I mean, you don't want a complete and total collapse, right? Like, you don't want it to be so bad that it starts impacting these young players that you want to develop, which is when you trade Robert Quinn, something that you run the risk of when you've already offloaded Khalil Mack. You have 0 proven pass rush at that point. So unless some team does something stupid, which I see highly unlikely, I expect Robert Quinn to be here at the start of the year. And when it comes to him showing up to voluntary workouts or anything like that, as you guys pointed out, he was off and on last year. And there were more questions last year about if he needed to be there every day coming off the season that he had. And it showed that it was really irrelevant as well as he performed this year. But with saying all that now, I want to jump into some questions. And Gary had asked a question before we had even jumped on today, and this ties into the conditioning and voluntary workouts about Jaylon Johnson. Mr. Shorty had followed up Gary's question with, is Jaylon Johnson in the doghouse because he didn't show up for voluntary workouts, or is his job in jeopardy? I don't buy conditioning, as Matt Eberflus said the other day, as the answer to him running with the second team. I'll let you start with that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount to unpack there. First of all, he has shown up for voluntary workouts, just not all of them. This is an example of what we were talking about. Jaylon was not there. I know the first day of the voluntary veteran camp that they got because they have a new head coach. I don't remember if he missed that entire camp or not. I think he may have, but he has been there since, in the building, at OTAs, at practice. That's why the question, that's how they knew he was running with the twos. And then we did notice that I think it was last week, actually, the first week of OTAs, that he was on the field but not participating. And Matt Nagy, we're going to do this all year long. I'll just say Flus. Flus was asked afterwards, and he said, "Yeah, just a minor, strain that we're going slow with him." And then you come back week 2, and you see him. He didn't take all the reps with the twos, but he took some reps with the twos, and the question comes out. And so I think that there probably definitely is something to the idea that they're keeping an eye on him, but keeping an eye on him running with the ones and the twos is no different. So it doesn't really explain why he was with the twos. So you get to that question, and it may just be that there's one of the other kids that they're not as sure of that they want to take a look at. It may be motivational. Jaylon Johnson does have a very different personality than what we've seen in the rookies. Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker, part because he's not a rookie; he's a third-year player. He may, we don't know what's going on with Jaylon personally. We haven't talked to him yet. Hopefully we will get to talk to him. They're off this week because of the Memorial Day weekend, but the third week of OTAs will be the week after next. I think June 4th, I want to say, is the Tuesday, if I've got my Tuesdays right, at which we will talk to him again. Which will be, the Bears will be out there again.
We did talk to him, Hub. We talked to him last week.
Okay. I apologize. That's what I thought, and I couldn't get my arms around it. So, I just wouldn't make too much of it. I mean, it may be that there are things about his game or his attitude or his approach that Flus isn't sold on. We don't know that, for sure or not. Alan Williams, who is the defensive coordinator, made his bones in the league as a secondary coaching safeties and some, defensive backs. And there could be a lot of reasons for it. But at the end of the day, we all know how to watch football. We all know that this kid is at least a good cornerback, if not one with a much higher ceiling than that. And they're not about to discard talent like that. So, Sean, a little bit of a puzzle, but another one of these classic, you can't make too much of it. These are not legitimate practice sessions, so to speak. This is more about installation than anything else. And, they're looking for that third corner who can play in the slot. There's a lot of different things that they could be looking at there. So it's a little curious, but I just wouldn't make too much of it yet.
Yeah. And this time of year too, with the guys who are not participating and guys who might be sitting out for, minor bumps and bruises. I mean, the first team defense didn't exactly look like the first team defense. There was no Robert Quinn, no El-Kadim Mohammed, no Eddie Jackson was present, but wasn't fully participating in the team stuff. So, I mean, you got a secondary with Kyler Gordon and DeAndre Houston Carson and Jaquan Brisker. It might have just been getting those guys familiar with each other because they might be the ones playing together, come the season, and the pass rush doesn't look like the pass rush, and you can't even really pass rush this time of year anyway. So I wouldn't really read a whole lot into that. They're just getting this stuff installed, and that's what matters most.
We've heard several players talk over the last couple of weeks about needing to prove it to a new coaching staff, which you hear, of course, whenever you have new people come in, but it seems to be more often than I feel like in the past. And I think there's probably been a big emphasis from this coaching staff about, hey, this is a new era. Everyone is a fresh slate. You need to prove it. So when you see stuff like Jaylon Johnson, I would guess that's nothing more than, the Bears sending a slight message of, hey, yeah, you've had a really good 2 years, but you have, everyone has to prove it. So Brian in the chat here, let me see if I can find it, had said maybe Jaylon Johnson got too many lows and needs to earn it. That's very possible, like a scenario like that where, we've heard Matt Eberflus talk about, what was it? They needed to get their running shoes on. Was that one of the first things he said, yep. Right? I mean, it could be as simple as that, them using those kind of techniques early in this process of OTAs to try and motivate guys.
Well, and it's interesting because as you were talking there, Robert just popped into the chat. Robert Phillips saying Thomas Graham to step in at his second season. Thomas Graham's a guy who we forget who was the guy running with the ones when Johnson was running with the twos. Again, I wasn't that focused on it to see if he was running out of the slot or on the boundary, but Graham was out there with the ones, and so I think they're just looking at guys, different combinations. There could be a lot of reasons for it. I wouldn't make much of it. It's interesting, Sean. You mentioned Al-Qadim Muhammad. I don't think, and again, I don't take attendance like everybody else, but you look for certain guys. I don't think he's participated yet in any of the on-field workouts. And here's a guy who is obviously Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams' handpicked guy to bring with them from Indianapolis, and yet he's not out there for it. So there's different reasons that these guys do this. It can sometimes be, and I don't know what's going on with Jaylon Johnson. I don't know that anything's going on with Jaylon Johnson. He is there again. But it may just be that, his feeling is that he's one of the important veterans on this team right now, because quite frankly, he is going into his third year with what they've done to remake this roster. And hey, if Quinn doesn't have to be here and Muhammad doesn't have to be here, I can take some time off too. All this is a sorting out process. In 2 weeks, I believe it's, I want to say the actual dates are June 14th through the 16th, but whatever, that week is the mandatory veteran minicamp. That's the only thing that they will do in the summer that is mandatory. Now, even with that, some guys will take it off, but that's usually strictly for contract reasons, or if you're Aaron Rodgers or somebody like that. But whoever is not participating on the field there, that will be a conversation. Until that happens, I just wouldn't read much into any of this.
CJ Williams brought up Kindle Vildor too, and that's another thing to talk about when it comes to Jaylon Johnson. When you bring in Thomas Graham and Vildor, another reason that Johnson could have been running with the twos is, I think, Hub, you briefly mentioned it or alluded to it, is that they feel confident in what they have in Jaylon Johnson, and they may have looked at the tape. Last year going into the year, we had high expectation for Kindle Vildor. Didn't perform particularly well into the bench. And I'm pretty sure Thomas Graham was the guy that replaced him, who had a really nice start and then kind of trailed off as well. And this new coaching staff, it could be as simply a case they went back and looked at that tape and kind of are perplexed with those two guys as much as the previous Bears coaching staff is. So they're using this time to get a better look at both of those guys. And
one quick note too, Thomas Graham has been spending a lot of time in that nickel spot, and defensive backs coach James Rowe told us that he's been getting private meetings with David Overstreet and discussing that nickel spot. So it seems like that's a direction where he's going.
Yeah, and Kyle, I'm not arguing the point. I wouldn't even say Graham trailed off. He got that huge start on national television that night and then ran out of time. It was late in the season. I think it was, week 13, week 14 when he finally got on the field. And people tend to forget about Kindle Vildor. I talked a lot about this during free agency and the draft, as people kept saying that, cornerback was their greatest need or one of their 2 or 3 greatest needs. Obviously, they needed to get a lot better at the position, but people forget Kindle Vildor got off to a pretty good start. When he got that starting position, first 3, 4, 5 weeks, he was playing well. And then I forget what he just had. He had a bad game, and I forget which one it was. I'll go back and look on that before our next podcast, and then really struggled to bounce back from it. But I don't think you write off Kindle Vildor at all. They've got a lot of interesting bodies there competing in camp. They know that Teven Young is going to be the starting nickel if he can stay healthy and stay on the field, unless one of these kids beats him out. I think they know Jaylon Johnson is starting at one of the corners and Kyler Gordon is starting at the other one. So the rest of this is just moving parts around to try and figure out, what that depth chart's going to look like.
And that's something to be excited about, that, you look at the depth chart, you're going to have somebody who you like or slash somebody with experience, if it's Kindle Vildor, in a backup role. And that's what you want when you're trying to figure out, this depth chart.
Robert Phillips asked a question here, our friend from Wales over in the UK, which I wasn't quite sure if we were, we don't know the people, we can't see them, so we don't know exactly where they actually are from. So I was like, maybe he's just saying he's from UK. And then he spelled offense with the C, and now I believe him that he's actually from. But I just saw a message saying that he was logging off, but he would catch the end later. So I feel bad that we didn't answer this while he was here, but hopefully he does get to see it. He asked, how long do you think is reasonable to expect until the defense runs smoothly with the new coaches, et cetera? He uses C for defense too. I didn't realize.
Well, scheme wise, I expect them to know their assignments on opening day And then you hear so much about playing fast and getting to the point. It's not just quarterback. You get to the point where you feel it instead of seeing it. That's going to take a few weeks. But considering that this defense is being completely rebuilt, I don't think it should take that long to play to their ceiling. We don't know. There's not enough talent yet here on the defensive line, possibly at cornerback. We don't even know who the third starting linebacker is. There's a lot to work out there. But when you realize that there's 5 starters from last year gone anyway, these are basically new guys brought in to fit this scheme. So I don't know how good the defense is going to be, but I don't think the period of adjustment should be all that long, Sean. I'd say by week 3, week 4, there's not much excuse to still be making some mistakes as far as assignments and scheme.
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the defense, is able to pick this up a little bit quicker than the offense, because that they're going through a big shift on that side of the ball too, and there's so many unknowns, and we just spent how long, 20 minutes talking about the offensive line, and I feel a lot more confident that this defense is gonna pick up their new scheme and run with it a little bit quicker than the offense might. But it's so early, it's hard to say too.
I agree with both of you guys there. I don't know how good the defense is going to be. I mean, I expect it to be average at best, honestly, but I don't expect that to be because they don't know the scheme. I think they'll be in the flow pretty quickly into the season. All right.
You look at the defenses that Al-Qadim Muhammad and Justin Jones and Nicholas Morrow and some of these rookies that have been playing are going to play. They're not 3-4 guys either, and so there's no reason that they shouldn't fit in pretty seamlessly.
Kenny Ray asks, have you seen anything promising from Charles Snowden, Dieter Eiselson, or the Wisconsin linebacker? I believe he's referring to Jack Sanborn there, a Lake Zurich grad.
Yeah, Kenny, listen, I was Charles Snowden to me was last year's Chase Allen, the undrafted rookie free agent everybody wanted. They went out and got him. But it is intriguing to me that they're still working on him because he looked to be kind of a classic 3-4 outside rush linebacker. That's what he was at Virginia Tech. That's what they thought. He would be in what I still call the Vic Fangio defense, even though it was not his defense any longer. With Sean Desai's defense, and he does look to me a little stronger. That was the thing on him. He's 6'7". He was only 230 pounds. Needed to add NFL muscle and an NFL weight room to be able to compete. But if they can put enough muscle on him, he can also be a classic stand-up right defensive end, pass rush specialist. And he definitely is here in the rotation. But other than that, Sean, he hasn't been singled out. And again, these drills are, it's almost like you're playing, touch football and not even finishing the play. There's, what are you going to see out of a pass rusher until they put the pads on and get to camp? So that's when we'll know more about Snowden. I think Iceland is long odds. Maybe he's got a shot at the practice squad again, but that's it. And Jack Sanborn, the local kid, who I think has a good chance to stick, minimally will be on the practice squad. Another example of, for an inside linebacker, and until they put on pads and start running around at the least bump shoulders, it's really hard to tell. It's interesting. The other kid from Louisville, CJ Avery, has just impressed me a little bit more so far because he does appear to be a little more active, I guess is what I would say. He definitely is, his approach, his effort, and his rah-rah, if you will, is all out there, on display.
Yeah, it's hard to see, a whole lot, especially with that pass rush, like you were saying. Charles Snowden is listed right now at 245, and I was just going back to look at his draft profile, had him at 232. So yeah, that's 13 pound gain here in the last year. But not much to report on Dieter Iceland. Jack Sanborn, I also think will probably stick around on the practice squad, but we'll just have to see how that goes in training camp.
Kyle, there are guys who just can't put on weight no matter what they do. I've always wanted to be one of those guys. Unfortunately, I'm the opposite.
That's me.
But we see these guys once in a while. And Snowden, because I remember talking to him about it last year, basically just, comes home every day and eats everything in the kitchen and doesn't gain weight. And so the fact that they've put on 12, 13 pounds is clearly weight room work and muscle, and that's very helpful. But still, at 245 with that long body, unless he needs to. We talk so much about hands on offensive and defensive linemen, and that's the technique they work on with him. And unless he can become really technique perfect and powerful in those hands to keep blockers off him, even at 245, he's going to struggle at that position.
The linebacker is an interesting spot for the Bears. It's the defensive version of the offensive line where we were just discussing earlier about really not having an idea at right guard. Hub, you wrote about it. Actually, if anyone hasn't seen it yet, go to shawlocal.com. Hub had a good piece on Nicholas Morrow that we posted yesterday. And right now, actually, I had a banner going earlier. We got a Memorial Day sale going. You get a year subscription to shawlocal.com to get you Bears content, all your local news across Northern Illinois. It's $40 for the entire year, so less than $1 a week. But Hub wrote yesterday about Nicholas Morrow and the potential, the upside for Nicholas Morrow, but also the unknown, a guy that was not able to solidify and stick with the Raiders. And then you really don't know about that third linebacker position right now. This, to me, this linebacker group is probably the most interesting group on the team to me right now, and trying to figure out how this is going to shake out in season.
My guess, guys, would be that that's Caleb Johnson's position to lose. And I only say that because he was a really interesting, prospect last year who did some nice things in the rare occasions he was on the field. It was mostly special teams, but he is also a kind of a prototypical athlete for the Sam linebacker spot. He is very athletic. He does bring the speed they look for, and he's 23 years old. Now, they brought in Matt Adams and Joe Thomas as insurance, and that's fine. But these guys are middle-aged veterans who've never been starters elsewhere. So it's going to be one of those three, unless one of the, how unusual would it be for a UDRFA to be a starter as a rookie, although Nicholas Morrow, coming out of Greenville, Division III or FCS, did start for, I think, 5 games as a rookie for the Raiders. But I'd keep an eye on Caleb Johnson. I just think that, as you're in a rebuilding program, if you've got, a few little nuggets that nobody knows about yet and they emerge, that's when these things are successful. And so he could be a very interesting player, number 92 to watch.
And, just in watching OTAs these last few days, Hub, I mean, they're in these sub packages like all the time. I mean, we have hardly seen them with 3 linebackers on the field at any one time. I'm trying to think back to Tuesday, and I don't know that we did during the 11 on 11 sessions.
Guys, I was sitting next to Flus at the coaches' breakfast at the owners' meetings in Florida, whenever that was, at the end of March. And they were well into free agency and still hadn't addressed it, seemed the Sam spot at all. And I asked him about it. And he looked at me. We were sitting right next to each other. And I thought I had a second head or something from the quizzical look on his face. And he said, well, you do know that with the amount we play sub packages, that the Sam linebacker is only on the field about 12 to 15% of the time. And I said, Coach, to be honest with you, I was not aware of that. I said, I knew that, he was the guy, rotating out in the sub packages, but I didn't realize that you were in sub packages 80, 85% of the time. There's a little bit of a disconnect there, but he did tell me, he explained the reasons why they just didn't value that position quite as much as some other spots. He didn't say they didn't value it. Obviously, they value every position, but that's what you can take out of the answer I got from him. It is worth noting that while obviously all 11 starters are important, that position is not as critical to the success of the defense the way he and Alan Williams want to run it as some of these other spots are. When you're going to play the Tampa 2, you start with your 3 technique, your Will and your Mike linebackers, and at least one, if not both of your cornerbacks. Those are the guys that make this go, and that could also tell us a little bit about going all the way back to where we started, the Jaylon Johnson story. I think my best guess is that he views Jaylon Johnson as one of the 3 or 4 guys most critical to their early success, and that he's going to, try and motivate him or coach him to the point where he can be that guy. That's my read on it, but we don't know. There could be more to it. We'll try and learn more.
80. What did you said 88% or Or
No, he said that he said that the Sam linebacker is only on the field for 12 to 15% of the snaps. I got it on tape. I think it's
I agree.
No, I know you're not challenging it. It sounds funny to me when I say it. That's why I'm saying.
And this is where you would never have an NFL head coach willing to talk to you on the record, or probably any coach on the record. But I would love to just pick their brains about how how NFL offenses have changed the way defenses align themselves. We're talking about the Bears being in sub packages that often. I'd love to be able to talk to coaches about what tendencies do they look at in opposing offenses where they feel comfortable being in sub packages at that clip. How are they making those decisions? What are they seeing? I think it'd be really intriguing to find out a little bit more about why it's skewed to that extent.
Sean, we talked to Dave Borgonzi, I'm not sure how he pronounces it. I apologize for that. The linebackers coach on Tuesday, who, by the way, his brother Mike is the personnel director in Kansas City and works side by side with Ryan Poles. Although Borgonzi comes to the Bears because he's been Matt Eberflus's linebacker coach the last 4 years in Indianapolis, and also they worked together in Dallas back, I think it was in 11 and 12. But he talked specifically about this. As a matter of fact, I think I used the quote in that Nicholas Morrow story that Kyle just mentioned. So again, go to shawlocal.com and look it up. But he said, just with the way that offenses have changed in the NFL today, and between the zone reads and the spreading people out, and no more power running games, that it forces teams to be more athletic, more versatile, and be in the sub packages more often. And that much I do know is true. Every team is doing it. We talked about this the last 4 years, again, with the Fangio Desai defenses, in that, moving Robert Quinn from outside linebacker to defensive end. Still the same thing with Khalil Mack. We talked about, when Eddie Goldman opted out, when Akeem Hicks was hurt, and they always pointed out that, with sub packages, we're in a 40 front, 65, 70% of the time anyway, even though we're a 3-4 defense. So, it's just exploded around the league. And, if you're a great edge rusher, you're a great edge rusher. If you have great ball skills and you pick the ball off, you're a great DB. If you're a great tackler and you run side to side, you do that. But as far as, locking in these positions these days in the league, every team is going to be a little different as to how they're going to use these guys.
Sean, you got any response to that as I try and sort through the questions? Well, here? Yeah. And that's why, we spend so much time talking about that nickel spot for the defense. And you look at the second half of last year and they really didn't have a one guy consistently playing that spot. We saw a number of different Bears, play the slot and try to do it. And we saw Jaylon Johnson, following the number one receiver in there a little bit. And then by the end of the year, they decided not to do that. And even Eddie Jackson was in the slot a little bit towards the end of the season. And that's why it's so important to have somebody who can consistently play that spot for you, because they're going to be on the field a lot. All right. I think we're pretty much caught up on questions, everyone. If you have something else you'd like us to talk about, throw it in chat here as we wrap up. We got about 15 minutes left here. We got a question about the practice squad here. They did increase. Oh yeah, I'll throw it up here. Mr. Shorty. Okay. How many players are on the practice squad? They did approve this just yesterday on or maybe it was Tuesday. I don't remember. 16 players on the practice squad now. That's up from 14. Also worth noting that they changed the eligibility to come off IR is now 4 games instead of 3. Previously, before COVID, it was 8, I believe. Yeah, I think teams were abusing that 3-week layoff a little bit, and so adding a week may make them think twice. And then the other note, I believe, I got to go back and read the fine print, but it went to 16 last year because teams were allowed to keep 6 veterans. It used to be that you had to be a rookie or a, quote, first-year player to be on the practice squad. Because of COVID and wanting teams to be prepared, they were allowed to keep veterans no matter, how long they'd been in the league. Remember, Bruce Irvin came to the Bears on the practice squad for, a few weeks before he ended up. And I think they will continue to be allowed to keep a number of veterans, regardless of their experience, whether it's 6 or not. I got to get back into the fine print of what they changed yesterday. CJ, our guy CJ had asked, do rookies typically show up to the vet camps?
I'm 99% sure, yes, that they also are included there. But yeah.
Yeah, they're called vet camps because the veterans are there, but everybody shows up. There's a 90-man roster, and voluntary is voluntary, but if it's mandatory, everybody is there.
Bear Truth, as there's two questions I'm going to kind of combine here, or comments. Bear Truth that said, well, if we run that Shanahan offense, teams better watch out because we will be running power. And then on top of that, Kenny had asked, any takes on Getsy and Jonico combination early? So a good opportunity here, guys, to talk about the early returns of what you've seen from this offense.
Yeah, let me just jump back in real quick for a second on well, I'm sorry, no, never mind. Go ahead. I was thinking about three things at once and lost them. You were asking about the offense there, Kyle. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Bear Truth had talked about a power run game, and then Kenny had asked about early thoughts on Getsy and Jonico. Or is it Janico?
Well,
I can't remember.
Janoco.
I'm so bad with
I guess
names.
we should have asked him when we were talking to him to pronounce it for us.
Yeah,
I thought it was Janoco.
I think we tend to confuse a lot of things with some of the terms we throw around the NFL. Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers play power football better than anybody, but he's actually the father of the outside zone read. And the Bears are switching to an outside zone read running game, which is not the same as a power running game. They do have a fullback, and so people immediately think it's a power running game, and they do want to be physical. But think about what Ryan Poles told us. He's completely changing his offensive line to get away from the big, slow, plodding maulers to get to the younger, athletic, more mobile offensive linemen. And so it's really not a power running game that they're going to, nor what Kyle Shanahan runs. They're going to be a version of the Green Bay offense. That's where Luke Getsy comes from. And even though this is counterintuitive, the Green Bay Packers are a run-first football team. They're not often amongst the top running teams in the league because eventually, Rodgers takes over when you're the best player in the league. You're the guy that you want to, have make things happen. But when the Packers are playing their best football, it's when they're running the ball. And look at what they did. Remember, they had Jamal Williams, number 2, behind Aaron Jones, kind of a clone, much like Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery are. But then they went out and got A.J. Dillon, who I loved, as you guys recall. I was hoping the Bears might look at him, but the Packers drafted him a little higher than anybody thought. I think it was late in the second round because he is strictly a power back. If he can catch the ball, he does a nice job. And they moved on from Williams. So they now have both the more athletic runner and receiver in Jones and then the power guy in Dillon. What the Bears have is basically, 4 versions of David Montgomery. You've got Montgomery and you've got Khalil Herbert. That's who Darrington Evans is, who I keep throwing that name out there because I wouldn't ignore him. They picked him up from Tennessee after he was cut. And I'm not saying he's going to be great, but he's an interesting prospect. And then the kid Tristan Ebner, they're all the same player. So even though they'll have a fullback back there, it's not going to be a power run scheme.
And if, I would expect them to be, they're talking about getting lighter and getting quicker. And part of that is, if you go on YouTube and you look up the Kyle Shanahan offense, they're moving the offensive line laterally a lot of the time. They're moving to the right or to the left and creating lanes out wide. And that gets your linemen opportunities to get out in space, and it gets you opportunities to get into the second level. And then I don't know about you, Hub, but we're always when we go to these practices, the media happens to be right in front of the running backs, it seems like most of the time. And it's been interesting to watch the amount of time they've spent on just the running backs in particular have spent on reacting. And, you see David Walker, the new running backs coach, he's throwing cones at them and they're having to decide which hole to attack. It's not necessarily, the play isn't necessarily, just this is where your hole's going to be run through it. It's read and react to what the defense is doing and hit the hole that is open.
You want the best example of that, folks? Go back to the divisional playoff game and the upset of the Packers. And about halfway to later in the fourth quarter, there's a pivotal 3rd and 12. And Shanahan puts Deebo Samuel in the backfield and runs a wide right, zone read. It's not a sweep. It's an outside zone read off tackle. and Samuel gets 13 and picks up the first down. And you could just hear 40 million people through their TV screens saying, I can't believe that they were able to call that and succeed with it. That's why they do it. It makes the running game, available to you. And I mean, rarely are you going to run the football at 3rd and 13, 3rd and 14, but it can work that way. And so it is far more about creating open lanes than it is about power.
Yeah, Green Bay, of course, with Getsy coming from Green Bay, that's a good, a really good comp. Hub. What do you think of Tennessee as well? I mean, Matt LaFleur, served as offensive coordinator there before taking over in Green Bay. I think that's another offense you can look at, and you're going to see some similar concepts in this Bears offense.
Well, yes and no. I think you're right. The difference, though, of course, is that Derrick Henry is the best running back in football and can run any scheme, and they also they've had a lot of different injury issues on the offensive line the last 2, 3, 4 years. But you look at the studs they've brought through there on the offensive line. I think that is playing to their strength. And then, of course, Arthur Smith left last year. And I'm trying to remember the name of the offensive coordinator because it was a bit of a surprising hire. So to be honest with you, I'm not as familiar with their scheme as I am with, some of the teams that I see more. But when you look at the run pass ratios, Tennessee is one of the few teams in the league that is going to run it as often, if not more, as they throw it. And, that's not the future for Justin Fields, but that could be the next step of his development is protect him, develop him, but give him some success because being good at anything usually breeds growth, and I think that's what they're going to try and do.
Yeah. And part of the reason I bring that up with Tennessee is they've relied heavily on that run game, but also to build the play action pass out of that. And by doing that, they've been able to kind of shield the weaknesses of Ryan Tannehill, get him on the move, cut the field in half for him. And when they've done that, Ryan Tannehill has had his greatest successes. And I think obviously Justin Fields has a higher ceiling than Ryan Tannehill probably ever did, particularly I guess now. But I think that probably would be a good step for Justin Fields is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like if they can use that type of to simplify the game for Justin Fields to get him playing quicker, that would be good.
Sean, I would argue that obviously Justin Fields has a lot more arm talent than Ryan Tannehill, but we shouldn't forget that the reason he's been successful in Tennessee and was not in Miami is because they've accepted the fact that he was a wide receiver in college. They converted him to quarterback late. I want to say it was Texas A&M. And then it took him a while in the NFL, and his best traits are still his athleticism. He's still pretty good running with the football. And while, hopefully Justin Fields' arm talent is as good as his athleticism, he is one of the better athletes in the league. And so using him the way that the Titans are using Tannehill to try and open up opportunity for him certainly does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, Matt Eberflus was asked what he's been most impressed with Justin now that he's gotten to see him on the field, and he mentioned that deep ball was the first thing he said. And there was another fun story too from Cole Kmet about there was some day this spring when it was super windy and the wind was kind of messing with the ball, and Justin was so upset after practice that he went out there and was chucking the ball into the wind just to get a feel for it, on a 20 mile an hour day. With the wind. So, he's still working on that deep ball. That was obviously one of the most impressive things from his college tape. And he's not done tinkering with that.
That kind of goes with what I was saying about Tennessee too. How many times over the last couple of years have you looked at a tight end's box score and you see Ryan Tannehill at like 18 of 24, but for like 260 yards and 4 touchdowns? It's because they're getting these big chunk plays through the air. And then Tannehill's adding usually about 10 to 12 rush attempt for another 60 or 70 rushing yards too. I think that's an ideal situation for the Bears.
Yeah, well, I would add in Tennessee, not to be snide, but it doesn't hurt having AJ Brown, Julio Jones, and Derrick Henry.
I'm not saying it's going to look as nice. No, I'm just saying that
I'm not criticizing the Titans. I'm commenting on the work the Bears need to do before you can hope for something like that.
Yeah.
Guys, the thing with Justin Fields, my favorite Fields plaudit so far came from Lucas Patrick, who said, we're out practice the other day and he was throwing the ball and the ball speeds up after it leaves his hand. He said the ball speeds up halfway there or something to that effect. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that sounds cool, but is that a good thing? I mean, what, where does that come from? So it's that's where we're at in the season right now.
Is that even physically possible? We need a physics major in here.
Yeah, I mean, velocity change, I don't know. It doesn't, unless there was a gust of wind or something. But he said it because he was trying to say how great this kid is. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know if that's a good thing, if it's true, So it's just the kind of stuff that we're trying to work through now to eventually know who this team is.
All right, well, we're going to wrap it up here as we approach the hour. Gary had a kind of a fun question, though. I'll end it on here for us. Can the offense promise us a screen this year that's successful?
I can promise you they're going to try it 20 times a game with Jaylon Jones, but other than that, I don't know. Some teams run screens better than any other teams for whatever reason. And it's interesting because I think the Green Bay Packers, I hate to keep going there because I know it bothers Bears fans, but I'm sure we have some Packer fans here too. The Green Bay Packers run screen passes better than anybody in the NFL. And what's interesting is they have done it since Mike McCarthy and Brett Favre, and Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers, and Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers. It's just some teams do it better than others, and if this is something that Getsy wants to employ, he certainly, was there where they do it the best. And I expect that that's something that he will try and do here. It may also have something to do with Ryan Poles' change in style on the offensive line, because to run screens, you got to have offensive linemen who can get out in front of them and find people to block at the second level. So I do expect it to be an important part of the plan, and we'll see how well they run it.
Yeah, I expect them to at least try a lot more. And yeah, if you have some more athletic offensive linemen, you can take a tight end and a right tackle and throw them out wide and see, try to make something happen that way. And you got Jaylon Jones, who they think could be the type of player that could take a screen pass and run with it. So I think they're going to try a lot more than they did under Matt Nagy.
I love the way the Packers use their running backs in the passing game, not just the screens, but I mean, how many times have we seen Aaron Jones getting down the sideline on a wheel route? I just looked it up because I was interested. I mean, like AJ Dillon had 37 targets last year. They employ those running backs in the short passing game to great effect. I mean, I looked it up because I just felt like AJ Dillon, every time he caught a pass last year, it was like a free 8 yards, essentially, and if the Bears are able to employ this stable of running back, there was a question we didn't get to earlier asking about the strongest position group and the weakest. Hub, you wrote about it, the running back group for this Bears team, and we talked about it a little bit here as the strongest position group on this team. They not only is it a good group when it comes to running the ball, but they all have the potential, I think, to be effective in the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's even an argument, to be honest with you. I mean, Montgomery has really been just short of Pro Bowl level. I think that he followed the 20 season by being able to play a few more games last year. Remember, he missed 4 games because of the knee injury. He probably would have been a Pro Bowl back. Khalil Herbert, very exciting as a rookie. And no, we don't know. We're projecting with Evans and Ebner, but it's a group that I know that they're pleased with because they fit the scheme so perfectly, and there is some real talent there. And Sean, I then went around trying to find the next closest that might be competition, and there just isn't. They're just too unsettled everywhere else. I kind of ended up at inside linebacker, which is what I was writing about yesterday. If Nicholas Morrow is the player that they think he can be, and I'm not sure that they're wrong, I think there's a good chance he can be. He and Roquan Smith could be one of the more impressive tandems playing in the NFL. Now, you tend to look at the 3-4s and you see, like Devin White and Levante David paired up, in Tampa, and we talk about them as a tandem, and there's a few others like them. Obviously, in the 4-3, it's a little different because but again, it may not be because they're talking about these sub packages, and a lot of the time, Morrow and Roquan are going to be the only 2 linebackers on the field, and they could be very good together with all that speed and athleticism. But I think that running back probably is the best position on the depth chart right now. And as far as the worst, I don't think I went there. I think I was focusing on which one was the best, but the one that's the most unsettled has to be wide receiver. I just, Darnell Mooney is the only NFL starter in that room right now. And as much as I love Darnell Mooney, I still think his ceiling is one of the top number 2s in the league. So it's unfortunate because, if running back is your best, it's balanced out if wide receiver is your weakest, but that's where I'd go, Sean.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, the running back room is looking strong, and I feel a lot less confident about, there's questions on the offensive line too, of course, but they got a lot of bodies and they got a lot of promising young guys. I feel a lot less intrigued by what's going on at wide receiver. Velus Jones is an intriguing guy. He's a rookie who we'll have to see how they deploy him and get him involved. But beyond Darnell Mooney, it's a lot of question marks.
Yeah, I agree with you guys pretty much wholeheartedly there. I will throw in one other name in the wide receiver room, free agent that they brought in, and Byron Pringle, a guy that I did like in college and showed some flashes when he was on the field in Kansas City, but obviously wasn't on the field a ton for them. I think there's some upside there.
Well, listen, there's upside in Velus Jones. There could be upside in Dante Pettis, who, is a former number 2 pick, although, has had 3 years in the league and not done anything with it. But in terms of known talent, as we evaluate this stuff going in, I actually wasted an hour and a half the other day going over all 32 depth charts to try and find a wide receiver group that was that lacking in proven NFL talent, and there isn't one. I mean, the Bears have the least known NFL starting talent at wide receiver in the NFL right now. And that tells you also that, so much of this getting the system in is going to be, based around that running game, because that appears to be the strength. The offensive line, Sean's absolutely right. There's not a lot of frontline talent we're aware of, but there's plenty of bodies who can play in the league. And there's never been an offensive lineman who wouldn't rather run block than pass protect. It's easier to be successful at. And so, you want to protect your young quarterback and you don't have wide receivers. What do? You play great defense to keep the score down. You try and run the football well.
All right, Hub, I'll let you say the propers and get us out of here. But one quick thing before you do that, if you're in here, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching this later, make sure to like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, get more people in here, find it. If you want, you can also hit the notification button. I know a lot of you asked, and I saw several people say that they appreciated that I tweeted or Hub tweeted yesterday that we were going live this morning. But if you hit that notification button, it will let you know when we have a scheduled event. So with that, Hub, let's get out of here and get ready for a holiday weekend.
Yeah, the ugly little secret just snuck out. Occasionally it is Kyle or Sean or me tweeting from my Twitter account, only because I am not the best at keeping up with social media. As many of you know, I'm not the world's biggest fan. But most of it's me. I'm not blaming them for any of the stupid stuff I say. Trust me on that one. Guys, we do appreciate you being with us every week and this week again. Hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Just the reminders that you can participate and join us. We usually go every Friday at 9:30. We get into the off season and some scheduling stuff comes up, and we had some conflicts for tomorrow, so we're Thursday morning. But unless you hear differently at one of our Twitter accounts, 9:30 Chicago time on Fridays, we're going to be putting one of these pods together, and we hope you will be with us. You join us through YouTube or any one of our Twitter accounts. Again, it's at Kyle Nabors, it's at Sean_Hammond, it's at Hub _Arkush. And it makes it much more fun for us, and we hope for you when you get to participate and let us know what's on your minds. If you just can't, it's not a convenient time, you prefer to have it on demand, that's great. Please go to the App Store on your phone or iTunes or shawlocal.com to get a subscription to the podcast so it comes to you automatically each week. We will not be on the field with the Bears next week because of the Memorial Day weekend, but the plan is still to be back with you guys next Friday. So until then, have a great week, everybody. Again, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.